I am Riley Bennett. I turned 31 this spring, though most days I feel older seasoned, if you will, by years of learning when to speak and when to hold my tongue. If you asked anyone in my family to describe me, you'd hear, quiet, keeps to herself, a little odd, but means well. I suppose I blend into the background. What they never saw or chose not to see is that I've built something solid and quietly powerful on my own, something that would one day upend everything they thought they knew. What I didn't know then was how a single evening, a rehearsal dinner meant to celebrate family, would reveal the cracks beneath our polished surface and show the world who truly held the keys to everything. My older sister, Alexandra, is the one everyone remembers. 3 years ahead of me, she's the sort of person who fills a room just by stepping through the door. She has the look, the pedigree, the flawless resume, private schools, a string of gold-plated internships, and a fast track to CEO in the family's media business. Mother calls her our golden child. Father, when he was still alive, believed Alexandra was destined to take the Bennett name to new heights. At family dinners, the conversation always circled around her next project, her latest honor, the glamorous friends she brought home from the city. Meanwhile, I was the afterthought, the tag-along. When Alexandra finished at Columbia, she received a Cartier watch, a new apartment, and a toast in her honor. I graduated from a state university, no applause, just a check for $500 and a gentle reminder to make sensible choices. When she landed her first executive job, my parents threw a garden party. When I started my own business, my mother's only comment was, "Well, at least you won't be bored." It stung, but I learned early not to expect confetti when you're the quiet one. It would be easy to say the signs were subtle, but some wounds are plain as day. My 10th birthday, Alexandra's ballet showcase fell on the same afternoon. She took the stage to thunderous applause. My party was postponed until things settled down. That day never came. When I was 15, my science project won first prize at the city fair. I waited by the phone for someone to call, but my parents had flown to Paris to watch Alexandra present at a debate tournament. Money was another matter. Alexandra never seemed to worry about tuition or travel costs. I pieced together scholarships and student loans, worked 2 jobs, and still ended every month in the red. Once when I asked if I might borrow $5,000 for my startup, my mother sighed. Your sister never needed help to succeed. Alexandra, on the other hand, once crashed her Audi and within a week was driving a new one, no questions asked. When I moved into a cramped apartment to save money for my business, my parents came by once, wrinkled their noses, and suggested I look for something more respectable. Alexandra's penthouse, on the other hand, was fawned over in the family group chat, photos, stories, the works. These things pile up, quiet but corrosive, until you stop hoping for equal treatment. Despite everything, I kept trying to prove I was worth something, not just to them but to myself. I worked hard, quietly built a climate tech startup, and by the time I was 29, my team had raised over $12 million from investors. I didn't tell my family. I knew it wouldn't matter. Alexandra ran into trouble last year. Her company had overextended and she was on the edge of losing everything. Without ever revealing my name, I covered 2 months of payroll with a wire transfer, routing it through a trust fund she thought belonged to a silent partner. When mother needed surgery, I quietly arranged the best care, paid the bills, and let Alexandra believe she'd handled everything. The money, the help, the quiet safety nets, none of it earned me a single thank you. I watched from the sidelines, sometimes laughing at the irony, the invisible sister holding up the golden child's world brick by hidden brick. Now, as I stood on the marble steps of the Bennett family penthouse watching Alexandra's wedding rehearsal unfold with all the glitter of a Vanity Fair spread, I had no idea how quickly the balance of power would shift. Alexandra called me earlier, voice sharp as ever. "Please, Riley, tonight is about the family's reputation. If anyone asks, you're consulting for a nonprofit. Don't embarrass me." I almost laughed but bit my tongue. After all, the world saw her as the queen. I was just another face at the edge of the frame. What none of them realized was how quickly fortunes can turn and how quiet strength, when pushed too far, will find its voice. If you've ever felt like the reliable one nobody notices, or the black sheep in a herd of golden calves, I hope you'll keep listening. Because what happened next I truly did not see coming. The Bennett penthouse glowed with candlelight and laughter. It was the night before Alexandra's wedding, and every surface seemed to gleam. Waiters in black vests floated from group to group, refilling glasses and offering canapés. You could smell the money in the air. Chanel no. 5 French pastries, polished marble. I arrived early as always. That's what's expected from people like me: show up, help out, stay invisible. Alexandra swept across the foyer in a cream silk dress, all diamonds and poise. She offered me a brittle smile. "You're early," she murmured, eyes darting to the grand dining room. "Can you help set up the place cards? Just make sure you're seated at table 6. It's the quieter group." I knew what that meant. Accountants, distant cousins, one elderly aunt who dozed off before dessert. The real party, the future in-laws and New York's business elite, would be clustered around Alexandra and her fiancé near the head table. Dinner began with a clinking of crystal, a shimmering of anticipation. Alexandra took her place at the center, radiant under 1,000 tiny lights. She lifted her glass and began her toast. "Thank you all for joining us tonight. It means the world to have so many brilliant, accomplished people gathered in one room. Some of you built empires. Some have launched companies, won awards, changed lives. We're so lucky to be surrounded by leaders and to welcome new friends into our family." She paused, eyes flickering over me for half a second. "And to my little sister Riley, thank you for handling the logistics. I know not everyone wants to be in the spotlight, but we all have our part to play." A polite laugh rippled around the table. My face felt hot. I could feel the eyes of strangers on me, trying to figure out who I was. Alexandra didn't stop. "Not everyone's meant to be a CEO. But Riley keeps us grounded. She's always consulting for something green, I think." The joke landed with a soft thud. I kept my smile in place, as I've always done. After the toast, I tried to slip away, finding sanctuary near the terrace doors. My cousin Ben, who'd made partner at a hedge fund by 30, offered a sympathetic shrug. "Tough room," he whispered. "You ever think about moving out west? They treat founders like rock stars in San Francisco." I almost laughed. Most of the night, I felt like an actor trapped in someone else's play. The conversation at my table drifted from real estate to politics to art auctions, always circling back to Alexandra's latest triumph. When someone asked what I did for work, Alexandra, hovering nearby, answered for me. "She's into air filters. Something to do with climate. It's very niche." She made it sound like a quirky hobby, not a company with contracts on 3 continents. Later during dessert, one of Alexandra's future in-laws turned to me with forced interest. "So, Riley, I hear you run some sort of environmental thing." Before I could reply, Alexandra jumped in. "It's a non-profit consulting gig, nothing glamorous." Riley's always been a bit of a dreamer. Her tone was syrupy, but the message was sharp. I saw a few knowing smirks ripple around the table. I felt the familiar ache, a mixture of humiliation and resignation. Throughout the night, Alexandra's efforts to minimize me grew more obvious. She would switch the subject when anyone asked about my work. During family photos, she ushered me to the edge of the frame. At one point, as I helped an elderly relative to her seat, Alexandra leaned in and hissed, "I told you to dress simply. Don't stand out, Riley. This night isn't about you." A cold anger took root in my chest. Not about me. For years, I had been the one cleaning up after disasters, bailing out siblings, covering bills, smoothing ruffled egos. Yet, in this golden room, I was treated as an afterthought, a ghost haunting the corners of someone else's life. Still, I stayed. Not because I was waiting for gratitude or hoping Alexandra would finally see me. I stayed because there were things, unfinished debts, unpaid truths still in the shadows. And as the evening wound down, something unexpected happened. A family friend, a prominent investor, pulled me aside, curiosity bright in his eyes. "I've heard whispers about your company, Riley. Something about a big Series B international contracts. Is it true?" For a moment, I glimpsed the world as it might be, one where my achievements were valued, not hidden away. Alexandra, noticing our conversation, stormed over and redirected the man's attention with practiced ease. "Oh, it's just a little project," she purred. "Riley's always trying new things. She'll settle down one day." Little did Alexandra know the next 24 hours would turn the tables for good. If you've ever sat at the wrong table at a family gathering or had your story told by someone else, you'll understand. What happened next? Well, it was something even I couldn't have predicted. I barely slept after the rehearsal dinner. My mind churned with memories, old wounds reopening, Alexandra's dismissive laughter echoing in my head. By morning, the city outside our penthouse seemed wrapped in fog, the skyline blurred. I almost convinced myself to skip the pre-wedding brunch, but habit and a sense of unfinished business dragged me back into the lion's den. The mood was tense. Wedding planners hustled through the apartment, clipboard in hand, while Alexandra posed for photographs with her soon-to-be in-laws. I lingered at the edge, sipping coffee, listening to whispered conversations about trust funds and joint ventures. I kept thinking, how many people in this room truly knew what was coming? The bombshell landed just after noon. Alexandra had arranged for a video montage, a collection of childhood photos and well-wishes meant to play during brunch. The projector flickered, and instead of the planned slideshow, a different image flashed on the screen, an internal email thread stamped confidential sent from the board of Bennett Media Holdings. For a few seconds, the room fell silent as words filled the screen. Pending approval, transfer of 20% equity to Riley Bennett in recognition of outstanding debts settled and strategic intervention during the liquidity crisis. C. Attached legal opinion and guardianship clause. The email scrolled further, revealing figures. Amounts in the millions. A signature from the company's counsel. The file vanished, replaced by a photo of Alexandra in her bridal dress, but it was too late. Whispers swept across the room. Phones lit up as guests snapped pictures, forwarded screenshots, sent texts. You could feel the shift in the air: shock, curiosity, and a faint taste of scandal. Alexandra rushed to the front, snatching the remote from the event coordinator. Her face was pale beneath the makeup, eyes wild. "There's been a technical error," she stammered. "Everyone, please ignore that. The video was hacked." But no one was listening to her anymore. All eyes were on me. An old family friend, never shy, spoke up. "Riley, is that true? You're an equity holder. You saved the company." The question hung in the air. I looked at Alexandra, her mask slipping, desperation flickering. Before I could answer, Alexandra rounded on me in front of the entire room. "This isn't your moment, Riley. You're here because I let you be here. You wouldn't even be part of this family if not for me." Her voice trembled, not with power but with fear. I saw guests wince. A few slipped out to the terrace, pretending to make calls. I kept my composure. Years of practice made it easy to hold steady under pressure. "I never wanted the spotlight, Alexandra," I said quietly. "But sometimes the truth finds its own way out." A hush fell over the room as the family's lawyer approached, holding a sealed envelope. He paused beside me, then handed it over. "This was meant to be shared privately, Riley. But given the circumstances," he cleared his throat. "Your father left instructions regarding the family trust terms to be read aloud in case of material changes." I could feel Alexandra's panic building. She reached for the envelope, but the lawyer stepped between us. "Legally, this is Riley's." Alexandra's future mother-in-law whispered something sharp behind her napkin. Guests leaned in, hungry for drama, some pitying, some entertained. I didn't open the envelope. Not yet. I simply placed it on the table, my hands steady. The damage was done, but it wasn't mine to fix. Alexandra's face crumbling, voice cracking, lashed out with one last barb. "None of this was supposed to be yours. You're just a +1 in this family. That's all you'll ever be." The words lingered, bitter as vinegar. I looked around at old friends who had written me off, at strangers now measuring me anew. Something subtle but profound shifted in that moment. I realized I no longer wanted their approval. Not Alexandra's, not anyone's. The humiliation she intended for me had become her own. As the guests dispersed in uneasy silence, a few stopped by to offer their hands, their cards, their reassurances. I thanked them, but the victory tasted quiet. Revenge, I'd begun to understand, rarely arrives with fanfare. More often it's the quiet exit, the knowledge that the scales have tipped. What happened next would change the shape of our family forever. If you've ever watched the truth spill out in public or had your worth exposed in a room full of skeptics, you'll know how quickly a story can change. The afternoon crawled by in a strange quiet. Guests, once buzzing with laughter, now drifted in tense clusters. Alexandra had retreated to her suite, and the air felt charged like the hush before a storm. The lawyer, Mr. Kessler, hovered near the piano, envelope in hand. Eventually, at the request of several guests and with Alexandra's fiancé, Daniel, urging calm, the family assembled in the main salon. Alexandra sat at the far end, her expression hard, arms folded as if bracing for impact. I took a seat beside a window, the envelope unopened in my lap. Sunlight crept across the rug, catching dust motes that danced in the air. The room filled, but nobody spoke above a whisper. Mr. Kessler cleared his throat, commanding attention. "With your permission, Alexandra, I'd like to proceed as per your father's instructions." Alexandra nodded stiffly. "Just get it over with." He opened the envelope and began to read, voice steady and formal. "To my daughters, Alexandra and Riley, I have made provisions for both of you, but with certain stipulations, reflecting your contributions to this family and its legacy. Should either of you or your companies come under financial or legal distress, the guardianship of the Bennett Trust Fund, valued at $12 million as of this date, shall transfer to the child who has acted in the family's true interest as evidenced by documented support, intervention, or sacrifice. Murmurs swept the room. Alexandra's jaw tightened. Mr. Kessler continued reading from a notarized addendum. It is my express wish that Riley Bennett be named primary guardian of the Bennett Trust Fund in recognition of her financial interventions during the crisis of 2022 and her continued silent stewardship of this family's well-being. He set the document on the table. Additionally, the attached clause grants Riley Bennett veto power over any major asset transfers, mergers, or sales of family property until such time as she chooses to relinquish control. The effect was immediate and electric. Alexandra shot to her feet, voice breaking. You can't do this. This was never supposed to be yours, Riley. You've always been nothing, just tagging along for scraps. This family is mine. Mr. Kessler held up a hand, quiet but firm. The documents are legal, Alexandra. They have been verified and filed with the court. Your father's wishes are clear. Around us, guests shifted, a few openly staring, others quietly mortified. The future in-laws began to whisper. Daniel placed a hand on Alexandra's arm, but she shook him off, eyes shining with disbelief and fury. None of you understand. She's manipulated this whole thing. She's always wanted to take my place. I stood, feeling decades worth of hurt burning away, replaced by something steadier, resolve. I met Alexandra's gaze. All I ever wanted was to be part of this family. You never noticed the ways I tried or cared, that sometimes I was the one holding things together. But I'm done apologizing for existing. Mr. Kessler nodded, gathering the documents into a neat stack. This is the final word as directed by your father's estate. Riley, you now hold guardianship of the Bennett Trust and executive authority over major decisions. Alexandra, any appeal must go through the probate court. A hush. Alexandra's mother-in-law rose, straightened her jacket, and gathered her family. We'll discuss the wedding arrangements with you later, Alexandra. The message was clear. The embarrassment had spilled beyond our family's walls. I remained standing, heart pounding, but unshaken. The war Alexandra had waged for approval, for power, had finally come to an end, though not in the way she'd planned. When the lawyer and guests finally filtered out, Alexandra remained frozen, her anger folding in on itself. Daniel tried to comfort her, but she barely seemed to notice. I collected the trust documents, tucking them into my bag. No victory speech, no fanfare. The real reward was the freedom, the knowledge that I had nothing left to prove. Before I left, Alexandra looked up, eyes rimmed with tears. You'll regret this, Riley. I swear it. I simply shook my head. I hope for both our sakes we find something better than regret. The room emptied. For the first time in years, I felt light. If you've ever watched a lifetime of power and control dissolve in a single afternoon, you'll understand how oddly gentle that release can be. What came next was not just revenge, but a new beginning. After the reading of the will, everything moved both quickly and painfully slow. News traveled fast. Within hours, whispers about the Bennett Trust Fund, the guardianship, and the rehearsal dinner disaster had found their way into the group chats and inevitably into New York's social rumor mill. By evening, the penthouse was nearly empty. Alexandra's in-laws had quietly taken their leave. A handful of relatives offered awkward hugs and even more awkward apologies. Alexandra herself disappeared into her suite, refusing visitors, her wedding veil discarded on the bed like an abandoned flag. I found myself alone on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker awake below. A soft breeze cut through the tension lingering in my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight shift. I was no longer the shadow haunting the edge of someone else's story. The next morning, the press began circling. Someone, probably a guest desperate for attention, had leaked photos of Alexandra's outburst and the will reading. The headlines were "Unkind Heiress Loses Control at Penthouse Wedding, Bennett Family Power Struggle Erupts on Eve of Marriage." I braced myself for backlash, but what came instead was a surprising outpouring of support. My email filled with messages, some from distant cousins who admitted at last that they'd always seen the imbalance in our family. Others from business associates who had quietly followed my company's progress and now wanted to connect or invest or simply say, "Congratulations." About time, the right person got credit. Alexandra's wedding went ahead, but it was a muted affair. Several major guests canceled, citing scheduling conflicts. Her new mother-in-law, icy and unamused by scandal, made it clear that appearances mattered more than apologies. At the reception, I watched from a distance as Alexandra smiled for photos, her eyes shadowed with worry. Rumors began to swirl in professional circles, too. A board member at Bennett Media called to request clarity on the family's future structure. Investors sent terse emails. Some contracts were suddenly under review. Alexandra's world, built so carefully on status and spectacle, was shifting under her feet. For the first time, she had to answer not just for her own decisions, but for the ways she had treated those around her. One evening, a message arrived in my inbox. It was from Alexandra, short, brittle, and defensive. "Congratulations on your windfall. I hope you're happy. I did what I had to do to protect our family's image. I suppose now you'll be rewriting the story." I sat for a long time before replying. When I finally did, I kept it simple. I never wanted to rewrite anything. I just wanted a seat at the table. We didn't speak again for months. In the weeks that followed, I found myself at the center of conversations I'd never expected. Alexandra's former allies, the ones who used to ignore me at dinners, now sought my advice. Clients who had once politely declined my business proposals now reached out with serious offers. I met with lawyers and accountants, learning what it meant to steward a trust fund worth $12 million. I assembled a small team, people I trusted, to review every contract and every major decision the family business had made in the past 5 years. It wasn't about revenge, not really. There was no gloating, no rubbing Alexandra's face in her own mistakes. But there was a certain satisfaction in seeing people adjust their posture when I walked into a room. The silence that used to greet me was replaced by cautious respect. The power Alexandra had guarded so jealously had never truly belonged to her. It was always a matter of stewardship, of doing the right thing when no one was watching. My revenge, if it could be called that, was simply this. I did the job right. I paid off lingering debts. I restored scholarships that had been cut from the family foundation. I made space at the table for cousins and colleagues who'd been sidelined for years, and I refused to play the game of favoritism that had poisoned us for so long. Perhaps the sweetest part of all was discovering who showed up not out of obligation but out of genuine care. My childhood friend Meredith brought by dinner one evening and said, "It's about time you stopped hiding behind Alexandra's shadow." My cousin Ben, the hedge fund partner, helped me vet business proposals. My mother, uncertain at first, began visiting more often, slowly thawing in the absence of Alexandra's control. At one impromptu dinner, surrounded by friends, laughter, and stories, it struck me. This was the family I had always longed for, not defined by blood but by choice. People who saw me not just what I could do for them. People who stayed even when things got complicated. I reached out to a handful of my company's earliest employees, those who had stuck by me through late nights and rough patches. I offered them equity in my growing climate tech firm. For the first time, our shared success felt real, no longer a secret, no longer something to downplay at holiday gatherings. The city moved on as cities do. Alexandra's reputation, battered but not destroyed, began to heal in its own way. She learned to stand on her own feet, or at least to stumble less publicly. There was no great reconciliation between us, no tearful apology. We both needed space to become ourselves without the old patterns dragging us back. What surprised me most was how quickly I stopped caring about being right or being avenged. With distance came perspective. I forgave Alexandra quietly and without fanfare, not for her sake but for mine. Carrying that old hurt had become a habit, and I was finally ready to set it down. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or if you've waited for someone else to grant you value, take it from me, you don't need anyone's permission to belong. Sometimes the truest revenge is to build the life you deserve, surrounded by those who choose you every single day. A year has passed since that last bitter showdown at the penthouse. Sometimes when I water the ferns on my apartment balcony, I marvel at how much a life can change in so short a time. My days now begin quietly, coffee brewing as the sun filters through my windows, the city humming below, and no trace of dread in my chest. I moved into a place that finally felt like mine. The old family portraits are packed away, replaced by artwork from local friends, color, light, and energy everywhere I look. It's a home built for laughter, for music, for second chances. Each morning, I walk to work at my own pace, never worrying who I might run into or what impression I'll make. No need to hide behind modest clothing or careful silence. In the evenings, I host small dinners with friends, chosen family, each of us with our own stories, our own scars, and victories. The air is lighter, the meals unrushed. It is in every sense a new beginning. The trust fund and family business did not become my life, but rather a part of it. I set strict boundaries, regular audits, transparency, and a rotating board that included voices far beyond our bloodline. The climate tech company, once a wild dream scribbled on napkins, thrived. We landed contracts overseas, expanded our team, and launched a nonprofit arm supporting sustainability projects in underserved communities. Some nights I still catch myself grinning at the sheer luck of it all. But more than money or titles, it's the people who remain that matter. My friend Meredith started a scholarship in her mother's name. Ben co-founded a green startup, and sometimes we cross paths at conferences, proud and slightly amazed by how far we've come. My mother comes to Sunday dinners now, sometimes quiet, always a little awkward, but she stays until dessert, progress of the slowest, gentlest kind. At the core of this new family are the bonds we chose, not the ones handed down like heirlooms. There's laughter, sometimes tears, and most important, a sense of belonging earned day by day. In a way, losing the family I thought I needed made room for the one I'd been building all along. With Alexandra no longer pulling the strings, the family business transformed. Our reputation recovered. We refocused on ethical media, giving voice to stories overlooked by the mainstream. Young staffers with bold ideas were welcomed, not ignored. Profits rose, but so did morale. Even the toughest critics took notice. My climate tech company gave me purpose. The work was hard, contracts to negotiate, teams to lead, problems to solve, but it was honest and mine. We weathered the inevitable storms, setbacks, and economic headwinds together. Some nights were spent sleeping on the office sofa, others celebrating a new client with takeout and cheap wine. The legacy I wanted wasn't a trust fund or a name on a plaque. It was the quiet knowledge that I had helped build something lasting, rooted in trust, respect, and hope. Outside of work, I learned to travel again, not to impress, but to discover. I spent a summer volunteering in Alaska, hiking and teaching. I read books I'd ignored for years. I said yes to more invitations and no to things that drained me. I finally felt free. As for Alexandra, she calls sometimes. The conversations are tentative, marked by old habits and new boundaries. She has found her own path, smaller perhaps, but steadier. The tabloids lost interest, and the business world moved on. Alexandra and I are polite, even friendly, but the dance we used to perform, rivalry, resentment, silent wars, has ended. My mother's health has improved. She tends to her garden, visits friends, sometimes brings over pie. There's a quiet understanding now, neither apology nor blame, simply a recognition that we all did what we thought was best. The rest of the family pops in and out, their dramas no longer the center of my world. Occasionally, someone tries to stir the old pot, a cousin with a business proposal, an uncle hinting at inheritance, Alexandra suggesting a family meeting. I listen, consider, but never let go of what I've built. My life is mine now. The peace is real, hard-won, and fiercely protected. If you've stayed with me this far, maybe you know something about feeling unseen, about waiting your turn for a sliver of love or respect. Here's what I can tell you: family is not just blood, nor is it obligation. It's the people who show up, who root for you in your quietest hour, who tell you the truth when you need it, and hold your secrets when the world seems too loud. You are allowed to choose who sits at your table. You can forgive without forgetting, love without surrender, and thrive even if you've spent a lifetime in someone else's shadow. If you ever doubt your own worth, remember that sometimes the strongest roots grow in silence and the brightest moments come after the storm. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Did you ever realize the people you needed were not always the ones you were born to? I'd love to hear your stories. Share them below. Let's remind each other that belonging is something you claim for yourself, and that the best revenge is living your own truth out loud.